How is Jesus magnified in the midst of the malice of people mocking him? Well, that's what we're talking about today on Byte-Size Theology. Hello and welcome to Byte-Size Theology. My name is Philip Nelson and we continue in Mark for our summer reading challenge of 2022. Today's reflections from Mark chapter 15 address the final moments before the death of Jesus and how even in the midst of mocking, the Messiah is magnified. Mark chapter 15 has 5 main movements. First, Jesus is delivered to Pilate and questioned. Second, Jesus is scourged and delivered to be crucified. Third, Jesus is mocked by a battalion of soldiers. Fourth, Jesus is crucified and dies. And fifth, Jesus is buried. Today's episode is going to look at how throughout Jesus' final day, leading up to his crucifixion, what the crowd said and did in mockery not only fulfill the scriptures, but they also inadvertently speak the truth. So, jumping in, mockery in part 1. Pilate proclaims Jesus is King of the Jews. The chief priests and the elders and the scribes and the whole council bind Jesus and deliver him over to Pilate. Among their many accusations, the one that concerned Pilate the most was that Jesus was being called King of the Jews, thus his question in chapter 15, verse 2. Certainly, the way that Jesus claimed that he fulfilled the scriptures and God's promises to have a king on the throne of David, that certainly would have been a claim to be a king. Having a competing king over the Jews would have created chaos in the region, and that was something that Pilate could not afford. His role as a Roman governor in that region was to maintain the peace during the Passover. Prior to any punitive action that Pilate takes, he calls Jesus King of the Jews 3 times. We saw that in 15 verse 2, verse 9, and verse 12. Then Pilate, at the request of the people, stirred up by the religious leaders, agrees with the people to release Barabbas. It is quite ironic. This man who had committed murder and was essentially a terrorist in the eyes of Rome, a convicted criminal, he was released over and against a man that, according to Pilate, had committed no wrong deserving of death. As a side note, consider this substitution. The righteous for the unrighteous, a man let free, and in his place Jesus undergoes a mean of execution that was reserved for criminals who were convicted of treason. But is this not you and me, my friend? The righteous for the unrighteous? So, continuing, we get into mockery in part 2. The Roman soldiers proclaim that Jesus is King of the Jews. After having him scourged, Pilate delivers Jesus over to the soldiers for the crucifixion. Prior to publicly executing him, they clothed him with royal colors and made a crown of thorns for him. In mockery, they saluted him and knelt down before him in homage to him. They struck him where those thorns were placed upon his head, and they spit upon him. Where the soldiers may have thought that they were showing the world what happens to any king who would stand against the Roman Empire, in reality, they were telling the truth. He is the king, and though they bow in mockery now, there will be a day when every knee will bow. And in reality, they were fulfilling prophecies from the Old Testament as well as Jesus' own words. As was common, the authorities would have hung a sign that listed the crime of those who would be condemned to such a horrific death. Jesus' sign read, "The King of the Jews," chapter 15, verse 26. And as he was hanging upon the cross, they divided his garments amongst themselves and cast lots for them, like conquerors who would divide the spoils of their exploits. And even in the midst of this mockery, we see some amazing things. The dividing of Jesus' garments is itself a fulfillment of Psalm 22, verse 18. Now, Psalm 22 is one of the most detailed descriptions of a crucifixion. The odd thing is this: Psalm 22 was written several hundred years before crucifixion was even invented. And interestingly enough, Jesus quotes from Psalm 22, verse 1 on the cross. He says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" That's in 15, verse 34. Furthermore, consider these words from the book of Galatians. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hanged on a tree. Galatians 3:13. That quote is from Deuteronomy chapter 27, verse 26. Now here, Jesus is hung on a wooden cross, in this case suspended by nails, and the New Testament authors now see Jesus being cursed, rather becoming a curse for us. We might make a further note. Consider this idea. The crown which the soldiers had fashioned for him was a crown of thorns. In Genesis 3:18, we see that thorns were a product of, or even maybe a symbol of, the curse. And so the symbol of the curse is placed upon the head of Jesus. The symbol of the curse under which you and I live has become the crown which was placed upon Jesus' head. And he becomes a curse by hanging on the tree. And by so doing, he would redeem those, you and me, who are under the curse. So this leads us to the next section, Mockery in part 3. Passers-by and scribes proclaim Jesus as the King of Israel. The mockery is only amplified now as people pass by. The chief priests and the scribes and all the spiritual leaders of their communities begin to join in the mocking. He saved others, yet he cannot save himself, they say in chapter 15, verse 31. Indeed, Jesus had said, I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. John 10:11. And greater love has no one than this, that someone laid down his life for his friends. John 15:15. And the Son of Man came to give his life as a ransom for many. Mark 10:45. So once again, we see the leaders in mockery proclaiming the truth that Jesus is the Christ, the King of Israel, chapter 15, verse 32. And interestingly enough, they say, let him come down from the cross that we may see and believe. Well, Jesus will do them one better. As he foretold, he will lay down his life. He will let them kill him. In fact, kill him thoroughly, as we read from the other gospel accounts, having a spear thrust into his chest. But not only will he be killed, he will be raised again after 3 days. Yet, as we know, they will not believe his resurrection. Despite an empty tomb and the eyewitness testimony of many people, they would rather concoct a story about a stolen body, confirming, in fact, that the tomb was empty. But let me not get ahead of myself. That's for chapter 16. So we move on. Magnified now in part 4. The centurion proclaims that Jesus is the Son of God. As Jesus was there upon the cross from noon until 3 in the afternoon, Mark states that darkness covered the land. Chapter 15, verse 33. And as the Son of Man breathes his last, we see a fascinating thing. The centurion, who is given charge over the crucifixion, says, truly, this man was the Son of God. Chapter 15, verse 39. This man, who had likely observed the death of hundreds of crucified criminals, beholds now the death of Jesus. And while this man likely did not have a complete understanding of Jesus' identity or why he came, or probably hardly any of his teaching, yet he makes this remarkable statement. Why make so much of this statement? Well, Mark found it significant enough to record. And while so many others in this chapter mocked Jesus, it seems that this centurion's tune is a little different. So in conclusion, my friends, as we walk through Mark 15, we have seen some incredible things. All the things that we covered in this chapter were said by those who were initially opposed to Jesus. And yet their proclamation is true. Jesus is the Christ. He is the King of the Jews, the King of Israel, the Son of God who saved others. While there were many who mocked Jesus, he is magnified, even in the midst of their malice and mocking. My friend, come behold this glorious Jesus. If you did not listen to this song, Jerusalem, mentioned in yesterday's episode, I would encourage you to do so today. See the link in the description below. Have you read through Mark chapter 15 yet? Which part of this chapter touched you the most? Join in the conversation. Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for joining me today on Byte-Size Theology. Until next time, my friends, may our great and gracious God grant you focused, faithful, and fruitful time in His Word. I'll see you over in the next episode.